Bernie Sanders did really, really, really well with the under 35 group, right, in his last election. He's probably going to smash it this year too. But more specifically in the last primary, when it came to him and Hillary Clinton, he did amazing with the under 35 crowd. Now, could you think of any reason why a bunch of Hillary Clinton establishment mega donors would want to get their hands on a platform that literally caters to the under 35 demographic in the political sphere? You know, it makes perfect sense to me why you would want to do that. People don't invest $20 million into something that they don't want something in return out of.
Hey everybody, welcome to Primo Nutmeg. My guest on the show today is Robbie Yeager. He is a freelance journalist who also works with the MCSC network. Hey Robbie, welcome to the show.
How's it going, Primo? What's up with you?
Very good to have you on. Now, I recently came across an article that you wrote, which I thought was great, which really got into the Young Turks and talked about some of the funding that they had received. Even though you wrote this article a few months ago, I really wanted to have you on to talk about this because I think it really is relevant, especially now with Cenk running for Congress. But before we get into that, I just thought I'd ask you why you first got interested in exploring the issue of the Young Turks.
So I guess the idea first came to me right after I got done. I was looking up, or I had done an article previously about CAA and UTA, a couple of major talent agencies, and kind of an email they had sent to Tulsi Gabbard. And then I started looking into those agencies and who was signed with them. And I noticed that a whole lot of, on-air news personalities, including those from the Young Turks, were a member of, or I guess represented by those organizations. So I took it a step deeper and decided to, just kind of take a look and to see their corporate structure, see, I guess behind the camera personnel, not necessarily what we're used to seeing on air with Cenk and Anna and Emma. And, I wanted to see what it was that was going on behind the scenes and if they truly were, I guess, living up to their motto or living up to their rhetoric as far as, are they truly independent or are they not? So that's just kind of where it all came from. I started doing some digging. And then, I found a few things that I felt were interesting. So I decided to write an article about it. And, the rest is history, kind of.
So, Robbie, yeah, I'd really like to get into this article and talk about some of the specifics of it. And it seems like it really starts off a few years ago when Buddy Roemer first invested $4 million into the Young Turks.
Really, the main reason the deal was done was because we need money for expansion because we're doing great, thank God, and we want to be able to do even better, right? And they wanted a good investment in new media. That's it. God bless. Now, can I be bought for money? Did we not resolve this? Didn't we go through this a couple of times? Okay, well, of course, every time, and by the way, it's true, every time you got to check, right? So whatever the real saying is, the proof is in the pudding, okay? You'll see going forward. If all of a sudden I'm like, well, I mean, was Iraq War really that bad? Then you'll have your answer. But I've been tested before, and so God bless, I'm looking forward to this new test as well.
Is that really the first example of when they started accepting outside money?
Yeah, well, as far as I could tell in my research, the first really big instance of Cenk Uygur taking, a massive investment, and not as big as the one he would take in the future, but at least his first one was about $4 million from former Republican governor of Louisiana, Buddy Roemer. And, it wasn't that big of a deal at the time, and people kind of scratched their heads a little bit about, how is this progressive network taking money from, a former Republican or a former governor, a Republican governor. It just didn't really make sense. But, by all accounts, at least in my personal opinion, it didn't seem like the content of the show changed too much. But it was the first instance that I could find that a new member was added to the Young Turks board. And his name was Kenan Ternasioglu, and he worked for an investment firm called Point State Capital. Now, Point State Capital was, like I said, kind of flew under the radar here. But what I found interesting was during the 2016 primaries, Ternasioglu himself donated $3,000 to Hillary Clinton. $2,700 to John Kasich, and he even gave $10,000 to Shank's Wolf-PAC, which to be expected, I guess. Point State Capital, the company that Turnauasioglu worked for, their their chairman donated $36,000 to Clinton in the 2016 election. He even donated $25,000 to Speaker Richard Boehner that same year. So,
Jesus.
Yeah, it's a head scratcher for sure. But going back to it, it didn't seem like the content of the channel was changing as of yet. Now later on, we can kind of get into a discussion about did it or did it not after the Katzenberg deal. But that's still a little bit off, or still a little bit ways off from this point in time, which we're talking, which was early 2016.
So who is Jonathan Larson, and what is his connection to the Young Turks?
So Jonathan Larson is the managing editor and co-executive or executive producer for Young Turks. Prior to joining up with the Young Turks, he was the executive producer or an executive producer at Al Jazeera. He's worked on such shows as Anderson Cooper 360. He was a producer on Rachel Maddow's Air America radio show. He also worked with Chris Hayes before he moved over to All In, and he's also worked with Countdown with Keith Olbermann. So he has extensive experience working with mainstream media outlets and some of the biggest mainstream hacks that you have ever. And this is where, once I started finding stuff, I just kept going, and it was like, man, and I mentioned in the article that they claim to be a progressive and independent institution, but their corporate structure and their upper level management would fit in perfectly at any other mainstream media outlet, such as Fox or MSNBC, CNN. I mean, it would almost be interchangeable because of the people that they have working there in those senior levels.
So what are your overall thoughts on how the Young Turks content changed during the course of the 2016 election?
Well, it's a funny thing because during the primary, they were, definitely, in my estimation, it seemed like they were very pro Sanders. However, once that wasn't happening, once let's just face it, I mean, Bernie Sanders got rigged out of that by the DNC. And, this was the turning point as far as I can tell with the Young Turks. It would have been a perfect time and opportunity for the Young Turks to kind of put their yellow vests on, tell their audience, hey, we're not going to stand for this. We need to, the DNC did us dirty and we need to do something about this. Unfortunately, that's not what they did. They decided to push all that to the side and say, vote blue no matter who. And in this case, that no matter who was Hillary Clinton. And it was kind of something unsettling. I mean, I've had people ask me, well, what were they supposed to do? Say, vote for Trump or, and the answer to that is obviously not. But it is of my opinion that if they would have just said, you know what, we're not going to vote for this establishment candidate because this establishment candidate is going to be pretty much the same as this Republican, in the end, which was what all those progressives were saying all along, is that there is not much difference between Trump and Clinton, even though the establishment media was trying to sell us that there was a vast difference. I mean, when it all comes down to it, they're both practically neocons, and there was nothing really, to separate the two. It would have been a perfect opportunity for the Young Turks, and Cenk in particular, to say, you know what? No, we're either going to vote for a third party, which would, or try to convince Sanders to run an independent. They could have taken so many other ways with the rhetoric that they were going with, but what they decided upon was, quite frankly, disappointing.
So following the 2016 election, there was a large $20 million investment into the Young Turks, and this was really the investment that grabbed a lot of headlines. There was a lot of talk about one of the investors, Jeffrey Katzenberg. Could you please just talk about this investment and also give us some detail on who some of the key players were in this investment?
Yeah, sure. So the $20 million came in, I want to say, August 2017. Now, obviously, Jeffrey Katzenberg was the big name on the deal, and for a good reason. He's a huge establishment donor, particularly to Hillary Clinton in 2016. He gave the Victory Fund Oh, and like, well, the victory fund, her actual campaign, all the related PACs that she had, of which there were many. He gave them millions, and he gave another millions to Priorities USA that same year. DreamWorks as a company, their employees donated over $400,000 to establishment Democrats, such as Clinton got over 30 grand, Chuck Schumer got over 21 grand, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she got over 21 grand from DreamWorks. Kamala Harris got about 16 grand. So, Bernie Sanders got like $1,000, and they were all from like really tiny donations from low-level staff. Almost all the executives and higher ups all went with Clinton, even during the primaries. And I'm speaking of DreamWorks here, of which Jeffrey Katzenberg is the CEO. And so it was kind of unsettling to see, such a huge Hillary Clinton mega donor, who we know. I mean, nobody is going to sit here and try to tell you that Hillary Clinton is a progressive, and if they do, they're just lying to you. I mean, there's really no other way to put that, or they're trying to fool you. So it was kind of disheartening to see a progressive outlet such as the Young Turks take so much money, with the man running point for it, being Jeffrey Katzenberg, and such a massive Hillary establishment donor. It just sent all the wrong signals and all the wrong messages. But the thing is that while Katzenberg was getting most of the press time, most of the shine for that deal, is that he wasn't even the main partner on the deal. He was just the big name, right? There were several other companies or firms that got in on the action with DreamWorks and Katzenberg whenever he came in.
So just to run through some of the other names that were involved in this, who is Shawn Cole?
All right, so Shawn Cole is actually joined the board of the Young Turks in the Katzenberg deal. See, Katzenberg didn't join the board, right? He just, he was a partner, but the primary investor was an investment firm called 3L Capital, and Cole is the founder of that. Now, Cole got his start as a venture capitalist who started something called the Leaf Group, which is a VC firm, a venture capital firm that he started in the earlier 2000s. About 2006 is when he started that. But he started that with $100 million investment from Goldman Sachs. Oh man! So he took $100 million from Goldman Sachs, made himself an investment firm, made a whole bunch of money, and then used that money to buy into the Young Turks and get himself a seat on the board. I try to be judicious with, sharing social media stuff like that as far as the people that I'm reporting on, because I don't want people to go harass them or not. I found on one of his social media pages, I just found it interesting because I'm trying to do my due diligence during the course of researching the story. He's taken a picture of his significant other with Senator Chuck Schumer and saying, the caption being, our favorite senator, right? So that's definitely good news if you're a progressive outlet, right? Getting, a Chuck Schumer fanboy on your board sounds like a good idea. It was just, Colo is he's the big board seat that, and you've noticed that at least one person has joined the board every time they get an investment. So the number of voices at the senior level, they keep increasing, right? So that's where we're at now. There was also a couple of other companies that, got in on the deal with him, which we can discuss here in a sec. But like I said, you hear Yeager and Kasparian, they go on and on about how big banks and all this and that, they're just too big, too big to fail, and they just go on and on about that kind of stuff, and yet they are so quick to take the money from those same people. Shawn Cole would be nothing without Goldman Sachs, and we all know what Goldman Sachs has done to this country. Now, either they didn't do their due diligence and didn't know, or they just didn't care. And either way, I don't find that to be excusable, at least in my opinion. I mean, there is such a thing as vetting your investors, right? If I was, say, an environmental group, wink, wink, that took if I needed an investor, I wouldn't take money from somebody who makes their money off of investing in fossil fuels. I feel like there's better ways to go about it. There's other people that with more honest means of making their money that would invest in you, and any time that you see, contradictory financial influence coming into an institution, and in this case, the Young Turks, it makes you wonder, is there a co-optation in progress, or, what's happening? So, I mean, it definitely raised some eyebrows, and for good reason. People had a right to be skeptical about this.
Along those lines, have you noticed anything that significantly has changed since this $20 million investment?
It wasn't an immediate thing, I don't think. I do know that at first, when Yeager came out and decided that he was going to, because he was catching a lot of flack for taking the Katzenberg money, and he came out and he made a series of videos, or at least one major video in particular, that basically he was saying that, hey, look, basically the point he was trying to make was that money corrupts politicians, but it doesn't corrupt media, or basically money is such a corrupting force in everything except for the Young Turks, right?
Of course.
He literally said corporations aren't people, which, depending on your viewpoint, in my opinion, they shouldn't be counted as people, but they are full of people, right? There are people that hire and fire and fund, and they sit on the boards, they make decisions, they literally point the direction that these companies are going to head in. So, for him to say that there is no chance of the money coming from these sources to influence the Young Turks, like, that was just a slap in the face of everybody that had stuck with him so far. Because, I mean, that's obviously not true. If money is a corrupting force in politics, then of course it could be a corrupting force in media. And just to say that it's exclusive to one but not the other, or saying that, oh, well, CNN and Fox and all these are bad because they do X, but we can do X and it not affect us, it just didn't make any sense. And since then, you have seen, instances where, they've pushed for Bernie, sure, okay. They've got this infatuation with Warren that I'll never understand, given her history, given her background, and they've got this disdain for Tulsi Gabbard, which, I mean, let's just face it, Warren, there's no way Warren is more progressive than Gabbard. I mean, if you're looking at this objectively, but I mean, you want to make the case for Bernie, fine, but nobody's going to argue with you on that. If you were truly the home for progressives, you would be pushing for a progressive candidate. And even though they have thrown some support behind Bernie, his primary challenger, at least in my opinion, on the far left, is Elizabeth Warren. So whenever the Young Turks go on and they, try to put Warren and Bernie basically on the same ticket, it's not helpful to Bernie Sanders' cause from that. And in fact, it's basically driving a wedge further between the same sect of voters that Sanders needs to get ahead.
Well, I definitely do want to get into the 2020 election, but before that, I just want to make sure that we cover all of the names and individuals and companies involved in this 2017 deal. So could you please give us a little bit of insight into who Alan Patrikoff is and what Graycroft is?
Sure, absolutely. So Graycroft is an investment firm. They are very large and very influential. They have been around for a very long time. Their founder, Alan Patrikoff, has also been around and thrown his money around significantly for a very long time as well. When Bill Clinton was president, he was staying the night at the White House as a visitor, with the Clintons. So he's very close to that family. He was Hillary Clinton's national finance director for both her 2008 and her 2016 runs. And she also, or his firm, Graycroft, also handles $1.25 million of Senator Dianne Feinstein's money. So he even made it into Epstein's Black Book, if you can look that up. So I mean, he's a very connected man. There's nobody knows their relationship, and most of the names in that book, you can maybe say that there wasn't anything there, but he is in it, and I just found that interesting because it's 2019. So if you're not cross-referencing, if you're not cross-referencing everything with the Epstein logs, you're doing a disservice, at least because we're all conspiracy theorists now, right? So, Graycroft employees donated $68,000 to political campaigns that cycle. The vast majority of it going to Hillary Clinton. Patrikoff himself donated $63,000 to Hillary and the PACs that support her. In both of those cases, Bernie Sanders got absolutely zero. So that lets you know that's at least three people that have joined that board, or at least three of the people that were investors in that $20 million deal. They were not Bernie Sanders fans. They were definitely pro-Clinton, and it wasn't just in the general. They were definitely pro-Clinton during the primaries, which is important to note because one might even be able to excuse them for being so pro-Clinton during the general when their only other option was Trump. Maybe I won't, but somebody else.
Yeah.
So, that being said, during the primaries, Bernie Sanders needed all of the attention and support that he could get. And at the highest levels of the Young Turks, he wasn't getting it. Like, they could have thrown that money behind a number of causes that would have benefited the Sanders campaign during their most important time. I know I understand that, Patrikoff and Katzenberg and Colo, they were not technically on that board yet, right, during this stage, but they were never, ever, going to help Sanders before they joined the Young Turks. And, even now, I sincerely doubt, I haven't done any follow-up as to what they're investing in or the politicians they're investing in now. But I would assume, I'm going to take a safe bet and say that they're not supporting Sanders. I know for a fact Katzenberg has donated to almost every establishment candidate that's not Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard. I have done some follow-up on that. He donated Biden, Buttigieg, Warren even, and Kamala Harris. So it's just kind of there's a mixed signal at the very least being sent whenever TYT takes this deal and the people that they take the deal from. It just makes no sense, and it makes you question at the highest levels of their organization, are they putting their money where their mouth is?
So one other person I wanted to ask about is Deanna Brown. Could you please detail who Deanna Brown is?
Yeah, so Deanna Brown is like a 30-year veteran of, she's been around the block as far as when we're talking about media lifers. She's a lifeline to basically every major media outlet. And she's been around and worked at almost all of them. She came over in December of 2016. It was right about 4 months after the investment from Katzenberg and others. Is particularly Graycroft, because Graycroft is going to play a bit of a role in the story of Deanna Brown, at least in the peripheral. So Deanna Brown, she came to TYT in a newly created position, a president position. They hadn't had one before, but they created one just for her. She had been the vice president of Yahoo and the president of Scripps Network before, and that's just to name a few. Her LinkedIn is like a mile long as far as her past references and past resume of all the media companies that she has worked for at the executive and highest levels. But one of those companies was Lorne Michaels Broadway Video. They hired Brown in April of 2017 to do a stealth project. It's just basically a project that they keep so far under wraps nobody really knows about, called Sanctuary, which is some kind of weird astrology / social media app that's in development. Maybe it's defunct now, because it's been in development for so long, nothing's ever come of it. But the reason I bring that up is because the primary investor in that sanctuary business model was Graycroft. So, after Graycroft invests into the Young Turks, 4 months after that, Deanna Brown joins their ranks as president. She has since left to the Young Turks in 2018, But it's just funny how things work out.
So someone else who you mentioned in this article is TYT producer and correspondent Emma Vigeland. And you bring up the subject of her parents, how they were state prosecutors, something that I actually came across that I found that was pretty interesting. Since you mention in this article how both of her parents signed on to a petition for Rosenstein to appoint a special prosecutor to oversee the Russia investigation. Well, what's interesting is that her father, Peter Vigeland, for quite some time was a partner at a law firm that Robert Mueller went to go work for when he left the FBI, and that he actually has since returned to following the Russia investigation. So it's just interesting to me and kind of ironic that her parents signed on to this petition to have a special prosecutor appointed, and the special prosecutor who was appointed was actually somebody who worked at the law firm where Peter Vigeland had been a partner at for quite a long time. I also think this is kind of funny when we look at, the coverage of Russiagate by TYT. Obviously, TYT has embraced Russiagate talking points. Cenk debated Aaron Mate on the show about Russiagate. Jimmy Dore, of course, left the TYT network. Part of that may have been that his Russiagate views were unwelcome. But anyway, I just wanted to get your overall thoughts on Emma Vigeland, on Russiagate, and just again any overall thoughts that you have on this issue.
All right. Well, we'll start with the Russiagate, because that actually fits in perfectly with the question that you asked me previously about has their content changed or has the message changed since they took the money. That's a huge red flag, right? The Russiagate stuff, the third party voters going on and saying, hey, vote for Hillary, don't vote for, basically a vote for not Hillary was a vote for Trump. That's the most, ridiculous, but that's the argument that establishment types use on you to disparage third parties. The Russiagate talking point is no different. That is a straight, legitimate establishment talking point that has been going around ever since Trump won that election. And even sometime before, it feels like a premeditated narrative that has been instilled in all of us to believe that everything that we don't like is a Russian bot, right? You've seen the meme for that, I'm sure. So yeah, that's a huge red flag for me, because it's just another excuse as to why the Democrats lost 2016. But I might be digressing a little bit there. As far as Vigeland is concerned, yes, her parents were both former U.S. attorneys. They were head of major crimes divisions in a pretty major district in the country. So whenever about 180 former federal prosecutors signed a petition to Rod Rosenstein to appoint a special counsel for the Mueller investigation, or what would become the Mueller investigation, both of her parents signed on to that.
And again, I find it interesting. It's just an interesting coincidence, if nothing else, that her father for many years was a partner at Wilmer Cutler, Pickering, Hale, and Dorr, and that Robert Mueller ended up working there shortly before he was appointed to be the special counsel who they were petitioning to have in place. So, I'm not saying it's necessarily a conflict of interest, but it's just, I think at the very least, it kind of shows that these people sort of all exist in, the same class, essentially.
Yeah, look, it's a small world, but it's a big club, right? And you and I aren't in it, but right. They are. But yeah, so when it comes to Vigeland, and especially her disdain for Tulsi Gabbard, you can go back on YouTube. It's a simple search to find numerous instances back in 2016 where Emma Vigeland is heaping praise upon Tulsi Gabbard. And despite the fact that nothing of Gabbard's main points or politics have changed in the interim, now all of a sudden we see a complete 180 from Vigeland in her attitude towards Tulsi Gabbard.
Hey guys, I'm here with Representative Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today about your Syrian trip.
Thank you. Aloha to you and to all of your viewers.
Thanks. Obviously, Representative Gabbard is a favorite of progressives, and you're also a veteran, and you serve on the Foreign Services Committee. So this issue of this conflict in Syria is very near and dear to you. Just to start off, obviously there's been one narrative around your trip to Syria, which you took recently. You were there for, I believe, 4 days. And the narrative has been blared from every major media outlet who loves to, let's be real, kind of beat the war drum. However, they don't really seem to care about the fact that we are arming indirectly, I guess, some of the terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIS who are working with these so-called moderate rebels, if they exist at all. So those weapons are getting funded to them. Can you give your side of things? Because the media doesn't seem to be talking about anything except more intervention in Syria.
The point I make in the article is I have seen Vigeland go on Twitter, especially, and saying that, hey, there's no way that Gabbard can be pro-LGBT, because she's gotten, because of her upbringing, right? She was raised in this ultra conservative household, and her father was very anti-gay marriage, so basically saying that, look at her background. There's no way, even though her voting record is immaculate when it comes to that, you can, get on human rights campaign. They've given her 100% on, LGBT issues. So the same argument could be used against Vigeland if we really wanted to play this game. You grew up, Vigeland grew up as an establishment princess. Her parents, one of her parents, let's just face it, one of her parents was the chairperson of a Kristen Gillibrand, fundraising group back in 2010 when she was running for Hillary Clinton's old seat, which means that in order for her to get that position, her parent had to raise or donate a certain amount of money. That very next year, Vigeland was interning for Kristen Gillibrand, right? And that's not to say that she got that, because of that, but there's definitely that possibility. It was like, your parents are plugged in to this system, right? And they're plugged into establishment types and characters that know people. And that's really about, when it takes to getting ahead in this world, it's not about, what it's about who a lot of times. But to say that Gabbard couldn't relate to, gay rights issues because of her upbringing, then how the hell can Vigeland relate to progressive issues given her upbringing? It's a valid question to ask. Now, obviously, the point is that people can rise above their upbringing and people can change, right? So It's not to say that, I'm right when I say that Vigeland can't be progressive or that she's right. It's actually to say that it's an asinine argument to make that, people can't change over the course of, adolescence to an adult when you've gotten out from underneath your parents' wings and seen the world for yourself through your own eyes and drawing your own conclusions.
Well, I think the issue is it's just very different treatment, right? And there's a real kind of disparity between how they treat Tulsi Gabbard versus how they treat Elizabeth Warren, for example. And, this news came out a few months back how Elizabeth Warren had received the Working Family Party's endorsement after a think tank where her daughter works donated $45,000 to the Working Families Party. And I don't really think that the Young Turks went after that story that hard. I also don't really think that they pursued exposing what Hunter Biden's corruption was in Ukraine. Yeah, I think there's just a big disparity versus, how they say Tulsi Gabbard was brought up in a cult and, sensationalizing her upbringing.
Yeah, they totally glossed over the Demos thing. Demos was being the think tank that Amelia Warren was on the board of previously. She's not anymore, but she was at the time that they made the transfer. But here's the thing about those that I've come to learn over the amount of research and articles that I've been doing since I've started doing this, and a lot of them have to do with organizations like Working Families Party and Demos and Center for American Progress, things like that, right? Most of these organizations are just in a giant circle of donating to each other. It's basically it seems like a giant money funneling operation. So there's a bigger issue at play when we're talking about money being transferred from Demos to Working Families Party. If it was a one-time thing with Amelia Warren, then maybe, but it has been going on for forever and probably will continue to do so. But they definitely, and there's an issue to talk about there, and it's called dark money, and it's a huge problem. And you would think the Young Turks would focus a lot on that, considering we've seen Cenk Uygur sit in front of that screen and tell us how bad money in politics is for years and years. But we've also realized that he's taking money from the people that are injecting so much of it into our politics in the first place, which is why we have this disconnect here with what they say and what they do. It's just it's strange to me. So I mean, I don't have a problem necessarily with somebody running a business, but I do have a problem with somebody, giving me salt and telling me that it's sugar.
Well, let me ask you this, because Cenk is now running for Congress. There's a special election in California for Katie Hill's seat, and he is now running for that. And I'm just wondering, do you think that the funding for the Young Turks may be an issue at all in the election? I mean, I know that he's been kind of playing defense on some other issues. There was the blog articles that he wrote years ago, and there's also been some videos resurfacing of him using the N-word. But I guess I'm just wondering, do you think that, all of these things that we've talked about today regarding the Young Turks and the funding and maybe the disparity between his message and, what the Young Turks has done, do you think that might be an issue at all in this election?
Well, look, it's possible. I feel like there is a lot to be looked at when it comes to his involvement with Wolf-PAC and Justice Dems. Like I said, I can't take any credit for any kind of research that has been done on those two subjects. I can just tell you from what I've read from people that have done research on Wolf-PAC and Justice Dems that it was shady looking, at least. There may be something there. The Katzenberg deal and all the money that he's taken into the Young Turks, it should be an issue with people that whenever he's spouting this anti-big money rhetoric. But I fear that only a small sample of the electorate, especially in California where he's running, is going to really care about it. I think it should be a bigger deal because it's definitely something that people need to look at. It's important for me whenever I'm looking at media, or especially people that are up there on camera telling us the news. It's not always important who that is. What it is important is the correlation between what they're talking about and who pays their bills. Bernie Sanders did really, really, really well with the under 35 group, right, in his last election. He's probably going to smash it this year too. But more specifically in the last primary, when it came to him and Hillary Clinton, he did amazing with the under 35 crowd. Now, could you think of any reason why a bunch of Hillary Clinton establishment mega donors would want to get their hands on a platform that literally caters to the under 35 demographic in the political sphere? It makes perfect sense to me why you would want to do that. People don't invest $20 million into something that they don't want something in return out of. That makes any sense. Like, I'm not going to give somebody $20 million for nothing just because, I think you're a good guy, here's $20 million. No, you want a return on your investment. You want an ROI. I don't think you're going to make a whole lot of money from your dividends being paid out by the Young Turks if you're an investor, but what you can buy is influence. And we see this all the time, which goes back to what Cenk was talking about in his little apology or explanation videos that he made for taking the money in the first place, saying, hey, there's nothing to see here. Money only corrupts politicians. It doesn't corrupt journalists, which is just nonsense, because obviously that's what the money is for. I mean, yes, somebody wants to maybe make a little bit of money, but I just don't see the Young Turks business model being that lucrative. I mean, sure, they're probably making money, don't get me wrong, but that's probably not the main objective. The main objective is probably getting your hands on a news outlet that speaks to the demographic of people that you got your asses whipped by in the last primary. So, I mean, that's just kind of where I was at on that. it's like I said, we need to pay attention. That's the one thing that I would take away from all of this is that, look behind the camera, look behind the on-air talent, because it's not just the person that's reading off that teleprompter that's the most important part. It's the people paying his bills that is that sometimes can be the real story and the real threat, because those people can tell you what to talk about or what not to talk about, and that's always a threat with mainstream media. And now you see, since I've released that article, I've noticed, I have people like, oh, come on, man, they're not really mainstream. They're not really mainstream. Tell me, how many times have you seen Cenk in particular be a featured guest on CNN over the last few months?
Right.
A lot. And Anna too. Or
even on George Stephanopoulos' show, I believe I've seen Cenk on there.
Exactly. But he had like a weekly segment on Cuomo, or at least he did, it seemed like, for a while. He was on there so often that it seemed like he was like a regular contributor now. And I'm sorry, but that's rubbing me the wrong way when I see that, because for years and years, the reason people flocked to TYT is because they weren't CNN. So to see him being so chummy with the folks over at CNN, it just, like I said, it's sending all the wrong messages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just a shame too, where you see other great talent like Jimmy Dore specifically. How he left, and when Jimmy was on the 200th episode of this show, we talked about it a little bit.
You, of course, were with the Young Turks for a long time. You're part of their network. And to some degree, I think that they have also pushed Russiagate a little bit. And in other ways, well, yeah, a bit. So, and also I know Emma has been really outspoken against Tulsi Gabbard. So, it just seems like there's also, this sort of MSNBC influence happening in the Young Turks. And I just thought I'd ask you if you had any kind of take on that, or just any kind of insight you might be able to provide.
All I can tell you is that when I started doing this show called Aggressive Progressives, because the main show took a editorial turn, right? So it was after the primary, after they decided Bernie wasn't viable anymore, they went full speed, 100% Hillary, and they had a segment called Loser Donald. So they would bash Donald Trump, and it just so that was the impetus for Steve O and I, who was the COO of the company, to start a show called Aggressive Progressives as kind of a counter narrative to the way the editorial direction of the main show. And I thought it would be good. We'd be complimentary, right? So we would point out, everybody has blind spots or whatever. Here's what we think. Here's what they. And I thought it would be a good thing. And then I thought that our reporting would would expose things, and people would see it and go, oh, I didn't know this. And it would change how they did what they were doing. That didn't happen. It turns out that, my effort to shine a light on contrary narratives of Russiagate was not, it was, it just created not a good environment. It wasn't welcomed. And I get that. I understand. And so that's all I can say, is that I was hoping that my reporting. So do you know anyone who won an award doing their reporting on Russiagate? I don't.
Aaron Mate.
I don't know anybody besides Aaron Mate, and we had Aaron Mate on our show constantly, and we would bring him on. I bring him on Aggressive Progressives when I was in the Young Turks studio. I bring him on this show, and we would debunk all the bullshit of Russiagate, and it wasn't hard to do. And so I just it's weird. We got it right, 100% right.
And I think you've been
got it right, 100% right, and I thought that would be more appreciated. That's all I was looking for, and it wasn't. So that's all I can tell you now. The way their editorial direction. I mean, I can't speak to that. I don't know why. I can't tell you why they've taken the editorial direction they've taken, or why they do what they do. That's up to you. I mean, you watch it and make your own decisions. But I was real proud of the work we did at Aggressive Progressives. We debunked Russiagate on a weekly basis. We debunked the poor Venezuela coverage. We debunked the gas attacks in Syria. We were way ahead of everybody on all this stuff. And I did a lot of it in the TYT newsroom. on aggressive progressives. And again, Aaron Mate won an award for that kind of reporting. Of course, they can't give an award to a jagoff comedian who says fuck every other sentence. So they gave it to Aaron Mate because he had the imprimatur of The Nation magazine. But again, like I said, Aaron Mate is such a generous guy and such a solid dude that he said he shares that award with our show. So
awesome.
I'm going to accept it. How about that? I'm going to go ahead and accept that. So here we were doing award-winning journalism on stuff like Venezuela, and stuff like Russiagate, and stuff like Julian Assange, and debunking everybody in the mainstream news media. And so I'm really proud of the work we did there. And it was disheartening to me. I thought that if I kept doing good work and I kept showing, the debunking of Russiagate, that eventually everybody would catch on. That didn't happen. It was heartbreaking for me. And that's all I can tell you.
That's a shame. It's a shame when you have those sorts of alternative voices, which are really needed, get pressured out of, an organization that is supposed to be progressive, underground, alternative media.
Sure. I mean, yeah, him, Michael Tracy too, left out of there because he wasn't buying what they were selling, and he wasn't going to help them sell it either, with Jimmy Dore as well. And like I said, we are in, fortunately now, an age where we don't really need TYT to be the only independent voice anymore. One, because it's clear that they aren't anymore truly independent media. That those days are gone. That ship has sailed. But we have people such as yourself, such as Nico over at who does MCSC, who I work with. We're out here now doing great work. Aaron Mate or Gray Zone. Jimmy Dore, obviously. Like I said, we have so many great options now as far as independent media that fortunately the one outlet that we used to have isn't required for us to have it anymore. So I look at that as a positive. Now, maybe we can thank TYT for opening that door. I mean, I'm not opposed to giving them credit for that. But like I said, now that it feels like we can't really trust TYT anymore, it would be a problem if we didn't have anywhere to turn. But now, because of what's happened to TYT, I feel like more people have decided to take it upon themselves to become the media. And, I wouldn't get discouraged. I think that there's plenty of great voices out there to go get this information from, so what happened to TYT is terrible in my opinion. But it's not the end of the world. Like we've got alternatives, and there's a lot of good ones.
That's true. Along those lines, though, I did actually just want to ask you about something briefly. I know we're almost out of time, but just on the last episode of this show, I had Aaron Mate and Matt Taibbi on, and one thing that we got into a little bit at the beginning was Democracy Now! And just talking about how Democracy Now's coverage of Russiagate, in the words of Jimmy Dore, was a little schizophrenic, where they'd have Noam Chomsky and Glenn Greenwald on, but they'd also have these sort of mainstream figures on, really propping up this Russia fear-mongering narrative. I don't know if you've done any sort of investigations into them. I know that I've heard that they receive money from the Ford Foundation, and some folks are kind of pointing to that as maybe some sort of conflict of interest or influencing what they said. But yeah, I thought I'd just ask you if you had any thoughts on why Democracy Now! May have pushed the Russiagate narrative a little bit.
Well, I haven't done any kind of extensive or targeted research on Democracy Now! I have seen their names pop up, and that is correct. They have received money from the Ford Foundation, and they also received money from George Soros's Open Society, the foundation to promote Open Society, which is his 501c4 or one of them. They're definitely taking some money from some questionable sources, to say the least. Now, how much money they're taking in comparison, or how much money they're taking from those sources in comparison to how much money they're taking overall, basically, is it enough money to really matter? I can't answer that question. But you can look at Open Society's tax records from 2017 because those are the latest available. And Democracy Now! Does definitely pop up in there a couple of times. So outside of some peripheral findings that I've come across and during research for other projects, I don't really know too much about what's going on over there. I do, from what I've heard, just speaking to people on Twitter and just some people that I know that used to religiously watch Democracy Now. There's definitely the consensus that it has kind of gone the way of the Young Turks in a way, as in people. It seems like the rhetoric has changed and people don't really know why. But that being said, like that's about as far as I know. Like I said, I haven't done any kind of targeted research into them.
Well, Robbie Yeager, I really appreciate you being on the show. This is a great article that you wrote. I think that you did some really wonderful journalism, which is badly needed today. You essentially were watching The Watchmen, which I think is great. So thank you for doing that. Do you have any articles coming up that you'd like to promote?
All right. So, hey, look, it was a pleasure to come on here. I finally got to see what's up with your show, man. I've been hearing a lot about it. I've been seeing you floating around Twitter, and it's always interesting, the stuff that you put out. So keep doing what you're doing because it's really great.
Thank you.
Look, for anybody that's interested in more of my work, you can follow me on Twitter at RobLitOfire. You can follow me on Rockfin, same name, RobLitOfire, RobLitOfire. That's where I will be putting all of my articles and some future video content. Me and Nico have a podcast that will be on there weekly. I am in the middle of writing an article right now. It is not released, but hopefully the beginning of next week, hopefully I can get it released, detailing the couple of endorsements that came out over the last week, one for Bernie Sanders, one for Elizabeth Warren, the Sanders endorsement being the Center for Popular Democracy, and the Warren endorsement coming from an organization called Indivisible. I'm going to kind of compare and contrast the two organizations, what they do have in common, what they don't, and why I think that both of them are bad. So that'll be coming out in the coming days. And, like I said, if you guys want to know more about me, you can follow my Twitter, follow my Rockfin, and you can catch all of my articles that have already been released are all on Medium.